It's best not to drive on deserted roads at night, or else you might experience some strange things you can't even imagine. This incident happened at the end of 2014, when I was on my way back to my hometown to deliver a present to my great-uncle. My great-uncle and grandfather were close brothers, but they had some conflicts when they were young, and their relationship had been strained ever since. Even though the younger generations in our family didn't care about that anymore, we still wished to help them reconcile their differences. That day, I went for a walk and thought to myself that I was lucky not to have encountered my great-uncle. But to my surprise, just as I said something disrespectful, he suddenly appeared behind me and scared me out of my wits. His face still stern and serious. He told me not to take shortcuts and to stay on the main road. Then he turned around and went back indoors. I could only nod my head in agreement since he was an elder, and I didn't want to argue with him. However, I still couldn't help but feel uncomfortable around him. I guess some people just give off a strange vibe that you can't quite shake off. I finally finished the task my parents had given me, and I felt relieved. After saying goodbye to my cousin, I set out to drive back home. Although my hometown was a small county, it was not a remote mountain village. However, it was still quite a distance from the city where I lived, and would take about 3 hours by car. When I left, it was already past 9 p.m. due to the upcoming Lunar New Year. There weren't many vehicles on the road. Unfortunately, the highway was closed. I had to take a provincial road instead, which couldn't reach 120 kilometers per hour, but at least the journey would be shorter, and the road was not too crowded. I estimated that I wouldn't be too late arriving home, and so I didn't worry too much. The drive went smoothly, but suddenly I remembered what my great-uncle had said about taking the correct path and avoiding small roads that could be dangerous. I thought he might have been reminding me not to take any unsafe shortcuts, but what I didn't expect was that suddenly a thick fog appeared in front of me. It was so strange, as if it had appeared out of nowhere. It's as if the fog appeared out of nowhere and only surrounded the road, with no fog at all on either side. It was so thick that visibility was reduced to just 5 or 6 meters, making me extremely nervous. As I was driving, my car suddenly stalled, which was very dangerous because other cars might not see me, and due to the low visibility, they might easily collide with me. I tried to start the engine multiple times, but it failed to start. If I tried too many times, I was afraid I might break the key in the ignition, which would not be a good thing. Just as I was panicking, I caught a glimpse of a figure out of the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw several figures appearing in the thick fog in front of me. At first, I thought they were passersby, but when one of them suddenly turned his head and looked at me, I nearly cried out in fear. The person had a pale face, hollow eyes, and looked nothing like a living human being. The scene made me panic. I felt like my breathing had stopped as I watched the person, but then I realized that the figure was ignoring me and continued to move forward, gradually becoming clearer. As the scene unfolded, I discovered more and more shadows, stiffly moving in the direction of the thick fog. I couldn't help but wonder, was there a connection between these shadows and the dense fog? Watching the scene, my mind stopped functioning for a moment. Not only did human forms appear in front of my car, but many ghosts passed by beside it. I realized that most of these people were spirits who had died on this road. Most of them were incomplete, and their clothes were very ragged, but I still didn't understand the relationship between them and the often occurring thick fog. Soon, more and more figures appeared, surrounding my car. Luckily, they showed no interest in me, and just slowly walked past me. But as the number of shadows increased, there seemed to be sobbing and crying noises that made me feel uneasy. I dared not look up again, and just covered my ears and hunkered down on the steering wheel for fear of being discovered by those things. I had no idea how long this lasted, as time seemed to have stood still until the crying slowly faded away. Fortunately, the terrifying sense of oppression and the hoarse voices finally disappeared. I mustered up the courage to look up, and saw that the thick fog had indeed become lighter. After a while, the fog gradually drifted past my car, and continued to drift forward. Finally, it disappeared on the road ahead. At that moment, I realized what had just happened, and immediately turned the key. To my surprise, the car started again. I didn't have time to think about why this happened. My only thought was to run. I wanted to leave that road as soon as possible. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to find a place to stay until morning. From then on, I never dared to drive at night again. 2 months later, I finally told my relatives at my great-granduncle's house what had happened. It turns out that my great-granduncle had really been reminding me to drive carefully. I heard that many vehicles had encountered strange fog and shadows during that period, but no one knew what it was and it remained a mystery.